Yeah, Your Excellency, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also want to thank you for your kindness as well. This episode will be my 11th episode.
Wow.
And thanks to you, some of the guests on the podcast, you're the one that asked them to come on. So I'm so grateful. I do really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I want to back up to my first episode with you was, I believe, 3 years ago. And when we spoke, your passport was still held by the government, the federal government. That was under Buhari. I believe your passport has been released to you back then, but then suddenly again, it was taken back again from you. So what happened during that period?
I think I'm in love with my passport. One of the basic things I always faced is restriction on some rights that typically everybody enjoy because they think those kind of rights give me more advantage to fight power. And one of it is that if I'm able to travel as frequently as I want to, I can reach more Nigerians, especially in the diaspora. In 2019, 2020, we found out later that the reason I held my passport was because they thought that while I was in Nigeria, my green card would expire. And then it would be impossible for me to go back to the US. My green card didn't expire, but I faced some hurdles trying to reapply for a different category of visa, known as SB1 visa, that didn't allow you to re-enter after your stay has expired. So if you've gone for so long and you haven't been back, it's almost taken forgiven that your stay has lapsed because you have not stayed around for a reasonable period of time. That was what they were targeting. And I won't be surprised if this is the same this time around. But it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I'm used to it by now.
Yeah. I believe you went back to the States when it was given back to you, right? And
yes, I did travel the same month after I was.
So how many years, was it 4 years they held the passport for, 3 years?
They had my passport since 2019 and I didn't leave they didn't release it until February of 2024. That's 5 years.
5 years. So how was it going back to see your family? How was it reconnecting back with your wife and your kids? How was that feeling like?
It was kind of interesting because when I was leaving, my most senior daughter, was 13 years old.
Yes.
When I got back, she was 17.
Wow.
She had become her own self.
Yes.
She was just very excited to see me, but there was still that
of course.
period. There was still a lag,
Yes.
who was this guy type of lag. My son had it harder, I think, because he was younger and had gone through a lot of motions, just asking when his daddy coming back. And then when I came back, it took him a while to start using daddy. He would just come to me. He'll look at me with some kind of surprise in his eyes and walk away because he was also at that point a grown man. And but over time, we all got back again, and then I had to travel. Every time I had to travel, it's always sit down, so this time, when will you be back? Because coming back at this point doesn't have anything to do with your return date on your ticket. It's subject to a number of situational variables. Yeah. And that's what have been my situation since I started coming back, because I had one more case that was pending when I left. So I kept coming back. So in May, I was back. I think in September, I was back. And I came back in October and participated in the protest. And I think that was the point at which they were looking into how to rearrest me and take my passport or do whatever they wanted. Because prior to my coming back in October, in September, I realized that they had put my name again, upgraded me on the watch list of people who could not re-enter and leave the country without questioning.
So, I mean, that's conversation with your son. I mean, it must have been difficult in the sense that having your boy grow up without you, those critical years, those 5 years, not seeing him, and you said he comes into the room, he looks at you, he lives, he doesn't really know how to talk to you, how to connect with you. But what did you tell him to reassure him or to be that dad that was absent for that 5
So there
years?
was nothing to really tell him, but we started like going out. So I'll drive him to soccer.
Nice.
Yeah, he's a soccer player.
Yeah.
And I'll drive him to school, and we would talk on the way. I would try to say things to him that, it's just basically what men would say to men. So we used to have men-to-men talk.
Yeah.
And he liked that a lot.
Yeah.
When I would tease him about, how's school? It's like, school is good, which courses or subjects you like the best, And one day I came to him and said, how about the girls? He was like, no, Daddy, I don't have any girls. I don't have any girls, but I saw that it was exciting to him.
Of course, yes.
So I would tease him on those areas once in a while, and then sometimes we would, of course, fight.
Yeah.
It's like when they're reluctant to do stuff, I'll try to step in as a dad.
Yeah.
But on more of a diplomatic side, because now I'm the offender who has been gone.
Yes.
And I don't want to come and be imposing myself on them to say, hey, do this, do that, because I haven't been there when I also have been around. So, well, on a balance, we started like jiving again,
Nice.
and reconnecting, and we engaged a few times. And then we started talking about serious things, like I'll talk about religion. And then he'll ask me questions about, so how does it feel like, to be in detention? Did you read? And I was like, yeah. So, but I realized he doesn't want to talk about things that are too hard.
Yeah.
I think maybe it's his own way of just evaluating that, these are not the topics for conversation. I'm just happy my dad is back.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna enjoy it. So.
Okay. How about your daughter? How was that period of connection?
That lady was the most accepting. She acted as if I didn't go anywhere.
Daughters and fathers, right?
Yeah, she was like, oh, wow. So that is so. I wanted to just drop me off somewhere. I used to say to her like, I'm not your Uber driver. It's like, hey, she was very smooth, and she also like singer, so she likes when I come with her to her singing events, and so we'll talk about it. And she plays soccer as well, but not on the kind of level that my son plays soccer.
Yeah.
And then of course on Sundays we argue about going to school. And it's like, I hope you guys leave me alone.
Yeah.
So that's that, but she was just like very upfront. She pretended like I just went on vacation and I came back. So
a long vacation.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I realized something, that they have all had their own individual lives set out. And, I try also, like I mentioned earlier, not to infringe on their privacies. I don't really want to know what they're doing beyond what I should know.
Yeah.
Because I always think about it like I kind of knew who I wanted to become when I was 9 years old, 10 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, but I couldn't express it to my dad.
Wow.
Because he'll kill me.
Yeah. I mean that shifts in mentality. Knowing what you wanted to become at 9 years old and seeing your kids growing up. Do you kind of feel like not being in their lives for 5 years? And I mean, it's not your fault at all.
Yeah.
It's the fault of the states, the federal government, that kept your passport from you and kept you from seeing your family. So that has nothing to do with you. Regardless, you're still going to want to fulfill your dreams, which is what you've been doing. Your purpose in life is what you're really doing. So, but that shift in mentality, like, do you feel like that absence for 5 years, that gap, do you feel like you would have impacted that belief or that goal into them? That at that young age, they too also would have been able to figure out, okay, I want to be doing this when I'm so age, just like yourself.
No, I have no excuses. I think parents are important in the life of their kids. Maybe the only thing I saw that made it a little less harder for them was technology.
Yes.
Because I'm able to like talk to them, video chat. And when their mom sometimes will have hard times with them, I can step in and say, hey, this daddy talking, but I don't think there's a replacement anywhere for the presence of a
Physical.
father or a mom.
Yeah.
But mentally, we just look at it and say, hey, you've been on a mission, and you just hope that your family members are not collateral damage or damages to that mission.
Yeah.
Or, so that's the way I process it. But I'm yet to completely understand how they process it. I think also, to my wife's credit, she is a very strong woman, a person, and she really covered up for me very well. So in that regard, like I said, I don't want to philosophize on what my absence of presence would have done in their lives.
Yeah.
But in a way, personally, I do not interfere with. I knew that long time ago, even when I wasn't a father, that parents just can't barge into their kids' lives. I hated it when my father was doing it.
Yeah.
My father always wanted me to be somebody different, become a lawyer, doctor, accountant. I knew I don't want to be a professional in those areas, that my life would be boring. But I couldn't tell him. But they could tell me what they want to be.
Yeah.
So they can always say, hey, yes, I'm going to school, but I don't want to be a doctor. And it's all right. But you couldn't tell my dad that you don't want to be what he wants you to be. That was an abomination.
Yeah, anathema.
You couldn't have those conversations. So they could ask me to shut up.
Yeah.
And I'll be fine with it. If you told my dad to shut up, he'll flip out.
Of course, yeah.
He'll call a family meeting and say, I've never had it before. And maybe next thing they will just pick you up and sacrifice you.
Yeah, different generations.
Yeah. So I understood that they come from a generation that is substantially different from mine.
100%,
and in two ways. One is that it was like I was a generation who rode on donkeys, and their generation on fighter jets. So in some ways, when I thought about how I grew up, my children can't relate with how I grew up. They've only been to my village twice. And when we went, my son couldn't deal with flies. It was just like, Daddy, what's all these bugs, where are they from?
Yeah.
My daughter liked it, but for as long as it was fun, which is, if you wanted to sleep in the village, like, no, please, we have to go.
Yeah.
Second time was almost the same way. But when my dad talked to me about growing up, I could relate, because there wasn't much of a difference between, maybe just a little bit of difference between the way they grew up. It's just hewing wood, cutting out, doing all kinds of menial jobs and going to school at a late period. But the difference was that I could go to school early in life. I finished secondary school at the age of 14.
Wow.
First time. And I had to go back for 2 years because I was too young, and my dad forced me back to class 4, and I did one more year and then wrote WAEC and did better.
Yeah.
That's why if you see my first WAEC result, which I posted, and the later one, the difference was clear. Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned your wife, your kid's mom. I mean, yes, you said she's a strong woman, but no matter what, it must have been difficult for her. I mean, you reconnecting back with her, how did it feel like? Was she understanding? How was that process of 5 years after meeting her again?
I don't know that anybody, I don't even think Winnie Mandela understood why Mandela did what, if he had private space, because there are a lot of emotions that goes in the mind of a woman whose husband is away. And I can't count how many, but I know that what she worried most about was if I would come back alive. Because every morning she has heard, either directly or indirectly, from somebody that the police had beaten me up or roughened me up, I've been shot at, somebody threw out a dagger to stab me. So that must be hard for her. And I was saying that if I was if we were to exchange places, I probably would have been more worried than she was. So, but I think her primary issue was having me back alive. And when I came back alive, she was very happy about that. But you know how it is. Your wife can tolerate you to be on vacation for a long time, but the moment you arrive, work starts.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, go back. But I must admit that she showed, extraordinary courage, strength, and understanding. Because, as I've always said about my kind of life, sometimes I even think it's unfair for people like me to get married, because I kind of knew that I came into this world to live a life of uncertainty, and marriage requires a lot of stability and certainty. And, marriage is like statistics. It has a mean, median, and mode. And so, and in between, mood.
Yeah. I mean, probably you must have made it up with her by taking on several dates and making up the.
So I have to admit, I didn't do well in this. She wanted more. She when I arrived, it's like, can we go do this? Can we go do that?
Of course.
But then she realized that, I was the guy that left.
Yeah.
And came back the same way, so I don't want to reveal my personal flaws and weaknesses. Maybe when you get to interview her, she'll tell you that. But I couldn't do everything she wanted.
Of course,
I was around. First thing she did was to take us on a vacation.
Of course,
to Barbados. So we went, and and she was like, "So, go and play with your kids. So go and talk to your kids." So, and I started. It was like ABC of fatherhood again. And as an African who's been gone for 4 years, my accent was a little bit clumsy. So I started to talk to my kids, and I was like, what did you just say? Like, yes, I just said this to you.
Yeah.
Let me break it down. Well, I want you to go and bring me water.
Yeah.
You mean water? I said, whichever one it is, it is.
Yeah.
That's on the lighter side of it.
Yeah.
But women, I would admit that I don't have anything close to the kind of strength, the expectation of the kind of strength she showed.
Yeah.
And the restraint she showed when I came back, just knowing that, I'm probably on the mend, So,
someone that has been to jail for years and came back, you need to
but I was explaining to her, please don't treat me like Nelson Mandela, because I am not ready for divorce.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing, because the reason why I wanted to begin with this set of questions was sometimes we feel when we see people like yourself, right? People tend to forget the personal side of people. Someone like Sowore, for example.
Yeah.
And people tend to forget that you're a man that has a wife, you're a man that has two beautiful, loving kids that love you and miss you.
That I know of.
That you, who knows, there could be more, right?
Exactly.
But at least, people tend to forget that, and people say lots of nonsense online. I'm like, this guy is also someone that has people that love him. And I hope that from our conversation, people get to see this side of you that they can relate to as well, because I think it's important for public figures like yourself, not just to be known for the activism.
So the point, and I'm not trying to shut you up.
Yeah.
The point that I don't worry about, I haven't worried about a long time, is that side of me that is lovable by everybody, because it doesn't stay for too long. So if you're liking me for a period, before you finish watching the show, I've done something wrong to you. And that's where you get that remarks that I used to respect you a lot until you said this thing that I shouldn't have said, or you behaved this way and all that. So I'm actually not trying to fit into, the expectation
of anybody,
of anyone. I'm not trying to fit into a box.
Yeah.
Because even I can't guarantee that I will be able to please anybody for a prolonged period of time.
Of course.
Otherwise, I would have been born an ice cream to make people happy.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned your dad, because I've been thinking. I'm a fan of yours. I mean, I think it's obvious. You're my first guest on the podcast. So, and like I
I
said,
didn't know. I wouldn't have done it.
and you and I have had so many off the record conversations. So you know how much I respect and admire you. But I always think about this. People like yourself. At what point did it click? Like, at what point did you recognize that, okay, this is the path I've chosen to take? Was it an influence you had from any of your parents, your mom or your dad? Or was it something that happened to you while growing up that made you say to yourself, okay, this life of activism, this life of leadership, this life of trying to change Nigeria for the better? Even and for me, I always say this to my friends, even though you've never held a political position, and the way Nigeria is going, you may never. But I've always said this to my friends, that you've written your name on the sands of time. Like, if Nigeria's history is ever to be written, or to be, like, we're never going to talk about Nigeria without not mentioning Sowore. It's not possible. Like, no serious person can ever say that Nigeria is this or that without mentioning people like yourself or Farotimi, and people of that clique that have influenced Nigeria positively. But I've always asked myself, like, what was it that happened? Did your dad, or were you influenced by your mom? Maybe in secondary school or university, something happened, or
I think that I've always had like a stubborn streak. Maybe it's because I'm from one of those states where it comes in with our DNA.
Yeah.
But there are events that shape people's lives.
Of course,
and mine was when I was 10 years old. I've spoken about this so many times, when we had a police issue in the village, and they came, raided the village. I'd never until that time seen that many policemen in my life. It was Christmas Eve. We're preparing to have Christmas. And Christmas was the only big event annually that we had, the New Year's. So that week was our happiest week as villagers. And then the police came in the last market day of the year and had an altercation with young people. They came back at night to raid. And it was terrible, because here is my dad in the ceiling, hiding away from policemen. The man I thought was courageous, sweating through, not ceiling now. Our type of ceiling was this is made of mat. So, and then upon the whole raid, there was a lot of information about abuse, sexual harassment by the police of the young girls in the village. Some of them my cousins who were 17 years old, who really never recovered. She just died recently of stroke. The trauma was massive at that time. But where I was 10 years old, I'm there swearing by whatever is out there that if I make it out of here alive, I'll fight not to let this happen again. That was the promise of a 10-year-old. But those kind of promises you can make to yourself too many times, and they don't come to pass. But then as I grew older, secondary school, I was there. I had, circumstances that which I questioned my dad. He was my teacher both in primary and secondary school. I was actually homeschooled in primary school mostly.
Wow.
I was traveling with my dad in Elijah area, and we'll pack all our things in the canoe and just row the canoe to his school where he taught as a teacher, and come back like 3 months later. And so I had all those experiences, ask questions in the middle of the night from him about plans and the Northern Star and all that. So but that was the defining moment, I should say. Yeah. Then came university. It was like I was waiting for it. And, I met all these activists. I'd been reading about them. I'd read about Bamidele Aturu, who did not shake hands with, the governor of his state, who was a military man, when he was supposed to pass out as an NYC. And I was like, I want to do that. So I've always wanting to do a lot of things. And then when the university came, it was the perfect moment and the perfect storm to be the activist I've always wanted to be. And I met Femi Falana. Yeah. And they was just great. And he connected me with Gani Fawemi, whose chamber is like 5 minutes walk from here. Wow. And Bekor and some Kutis, whose house is like 5 minutes from here. Wow. So that's why we cut our teeth with all those lawyers and activists and when the struggle for military rule came, against military rule came, we did the work, likely. I wasn't the only one. I like to say this because sometimes people ask, were you the only one? Yes, of course, a lot of student activists around at that time. I can't mention all their names. And we had lawyers outside. We had a lot of great people across the country, and in some cases across the world, who supported the struggle at that time. But I did become a national figure when I was in my 20s, when I became the student union president of the University of Lagos, after I was expelled for the first time in 1992 for participating in Babangida Moscow. And then 1993 came, the Abiola struggle came, June 12th. So those are the early stages of the national part of the struggle.
Yeah. We're going to come back to Abiola at some point. That's one of my questions. I just want to go through this. But, I mean, you mentioned activism and your journey in doing this. And you've been around for a long time, to be honest. I mean, probably 20 years, 2 decades you've been doing this for.
Well, 3 decades.
30 years?
Yeah, I started pretty much upon arrival in the university. It was in 1989.
Wow.
But I became student union president of Unilag in 1992.
Wow, that's a long time.
And that's some 33 years now.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And would you say that in the sense, I mean, my question would be, this struggle you've been on, this trying to get Nigeria to be better, to work with veteran president now, I believe twice, right? You've contested for president. Why do you think the Nigerian youth is yet to buy into you? Like, why do you think they're yet to realize that perhaps sticking to this old, recycled set of leaders cannot be the way to go? We cannot just keep on recycling this old. Some of them might even be young, like the former governor of Kogi State, for example, but people that we know that are not up to the job.
So the question that's most important is, in what form do I want people to accept me? I think my biggest issue is that I don't want to be accepted on certain terms. And some of the times is to just be the teddy bear that people can hug and just sing them lullaby. I'm more on the harder side of acceptance. That if you're going to accept me, it must be that you accept me the way I am. I don't want you to accept me because I lied to you or I presented myself in a format that is different from what I am and who I am. And so that has been number one. The second aspect is, what do they want to accept? A lot of young people that you talk about, not only young people, even older people, accept people because they are very good at lying to them. They accept them because they have money to share to them, even though they'll tell you that you don't need to bring money. They're lying to you. And they accept you totally because they can connect with you on certain level that is more extraterrestrial, if you can show that, God spoke to you, right? And that you were sent by God, and they can prove by pastor putting their hand on you or imam endorsing you, or, you have ample traditional energy to wow them. The other part is that, we just use the word youth carelessly. A lot of people who don't accept me are not young people. They are like, some of them are my classmates. They also did not accept me when I was in school. They did not accept that Nigeria needed democracy.
Wow.
Yes, we went to school with them and they fought us and said, look, we want to graduate. FUK Abiola, June 12th, please. So they would confront us in those days. So being accepted is not what is limited to the youth. Yeah. So the last part to explain is that the younger generation that you think should accept you are way too young to even understand what to accept. So most of the time they want to accept excitement. And they don't find me exciting. I don't. Yeah. So they just say, look at this show already. He's nice, but tomorrow he's not nice. And then they then have to be fed with unbelievable amount of rubbish about me, which their parents cooked up, politicians cooked up. So in a nutshell, the department where I work or where I've developed my skills is not a department of acceptability. Anybody who has done this work from the time immemorial have never been accepted. They are always subjected to ridicule. Sometimes the only time you're accepted is when you are no more. Then it was just start, and that happened to Martin Luther King. It happened to Malcolm X. It happened to lots of people.
Yeah.
Maybe Mandela was a more, the luckier person that he spent long enough to be accepted, but his acceptance was not based on even his detention. It was based on convenience, that he's the only person who can midwife the kind of South Africa
transition
that the whites wanted to transition, not too fast, not too slow. And if you talk to an average South African, you have a different opinion about Mandela. So that's what we must understand, is all of these factors put together is what is responsible for it. And if you don't have a little bit of all of this, getting accepted is not going to be something. I mean, it doesn't bother me that I'm not accepted, because I understand when they don't. But, I just hope that people will accept the fact that some people are real and some are not. Some are genuine, but they may not come in the package that you love.
Yeah. But is there anything you think you're doing wrong? Like, I mean, I do a lot of self-reflection. Like, I do a lot of, whenever I'm in the gym or just maybe driving, I'm just reflecting and thinking, and I'm just in deep thoughts, just talking to myself, right? Trying to, when I was actually speaking to one of my closest friends, I was like, if I look back at 10 years ago, I'm like, we've really matured a lot and we've grown a lot. Like, some things I did 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, or even maybe last year, I wouldn't do them today. And my question would be, looking back, like, is there anything you think that you're doing wrong? Like, is there anything you feel like, I'm not saying compromise your standards or your beliefs, no. But is there any way you feel like, okay, maybe if I do step A, step B, step C, maybe I can garner more votes or garner more, not necessarily likability, but not necessarily acceptance, but really like these movements that I'm leading will gain more traction? Like, do you sometimes look back and self-reflect or criticize?
I think they said the biggest room in the world is the room for improvement.
Yeah.
But I'm also quick to understand that this is deeply a philosophical situation. The man I just mentioned to you, Gani Fawemi, was a man without flaws. And in 2003, he ran for election in this country. Even in Ondo State, where he came from, he couldn't campaign. I remember then I was not in Nigeria, reading and weeping one day that they said Ghana's convoy was attacked by villagers because they had no money to give them. They're just like, get away, you this lousy man. We need money. Stop telling us that you will give us free education or free healthcare. That's a lie. You must have seen some of Gani Fawemi's campaign video as well. He must have wowed you. And
I was quite young, but I remember watching on NTA.
You were wondering what happened to this country at that time. I'm just using him as an example. Femi Falana contested for governorship in Ekiti. Do you know who defeated him?
Fayemi?
Fayose.
Oh, Fayose, okay.
And if you grew up in this country, you would never dream that a day would come where such a person would defeat someone as ideologically sound, brilliant, and experienced as Femi Falana. So all you need to do is open your mind and eyes to see the society we are in. And this question will not disturb you about reflection. The only thing you can do is to mutate, and regardless of how you mutate, if you don't make the compromises that the people who are in power today make, you can't be in power if you can't steal, if you can't kill, if you cannot destroy, if you cannot swear to some oath of allegiance. You can't. So, but it is up to the people to decide if this is trajectory you want, because this trajectory has results, and you can see that they are very immediate.
Yeah.
The moment you vote for the wrong people, your neighborhood start to decay. Your hospitals start to disappear. Your schools start to degenerate. Your life start to be bifurcated and ruined. So you get bastardized. That is the immediate results you see. And so if I were to do all of the things anybody could reflect about pertaining to Nigeria's political system, I would have gone so round. I would have been so cyclical in my conduct that you won't recognize me by now.
You'd have also lost your soul as well in the process.
Well,
probably.
It doesn't matter to an average Nigerian politician. They don't have soul.
That's true.
Yeah,
true.
So they'll just tell you they can buy it if they have enough money. The soul that can be embraced by the public. So that's why I don't regret anything. I think what is most important for me and to me is to live a life in which I carry no burden in my heart.
Yes.
That I hurt anybody, I
go to sleep peacefully.
And go to sleep peacefully. And then you hope that they let you sleep peacefully. Because I really don't think that I can sleep peacefully at first. I don't have to do wrong to not be able to sleep peacefully. I have to consider my environment. Yes. And I can't sleep when I know all of the atrocities committed against people. So sometimes I'm vicariously carrying other people's burdens.
Of course. That's what a good leader should do. Vicariously carry other people's burdens and responsibilities. So I do agree. I think for me, you mentioned the philosophical angle to it, and one of the things I've battled with and thought about is, is there not another way to do it, in the sense that a good person, a good leader, can do bad things in parentheses, in air quotes, right? And this is just me thinking out loud, and I've not just out loud, I've thought about this for years, right? And it also goes to the theory of Machiavelli, right? In the sense that the end justifies the means. But I think one of the things that people miss when it comes to Machiavelli, and one of the things I'm also studying Machiavelli as well as a political theory, is Machiavelli talks of, yes, the end justifies the means, but also Machiavelli also talks about the prince doing good things. So it doesn't just matter to you to do what it takes to get power. But when you get power, the Nigerian politicians, yes, does whatever they do to get power. But they always miss the end part of Machiavellian theory, which is, when you get that power, do good things with that power. Like, do the best things with the power you've gotten. Because it makes no sense to kill and to destroy and maim and steal votes and write election results only for you to not get that power and misuse the power. That is, at that point, we're just fooling ourselves, right? It's all a waste of time and money and lives to have done all of that. But that's what, for me, I'm just like thinking out loud, like, can't there be, and like you said, it's a philosophical question, that can't there be another way to do it, that someone like yourself will do what it takes to get the power, knowing that Mr. Omoyele Sowore will do the right thing when he gets the power? Or do you think that by doing all those bad things, in the course of doing those bad things, you've already become so involved, and you've already sold your soul, you've already become indebted to those people, that you can't then win and do the good things you want to do? I don't know if you get the point.
This question was actually asked of me last week at a public event, and the same thing. The guy said, "Can't you just be part of them and then betray them later?"
I won't even use. I think that's so simplistic.
That's the way he framed his own question.
That's a bit simplistic. Yeah.
So, but here is what is paramount. One is my intentions, whether they're good enough or not. The other part is the amount of burden I want to carry in my conscience, that I had to go through all of this just so that I can gain power. I am not trying to gain power only to do good. I want to gain power to sustain good. People who have gained power thinking they can do good, a few among them who actually profess that they won't do good, they were unable to sustain the good. Some of them have been consumed by the little efforts they made to do good. We've seen that Nigeria is littered with
countless.
Yes, it's the burial ground for good-intentioned people.
Yes.
So if you already know that in an attempt to do good, you'll be part of some process that will not bring about a good end. It means that I cannot justify a good end. Why do you want to do it? Maybe part of the reason I do what I do is to also provide philosophical, guidance to those who want to listen to me, that good though can overcome evil. Because the truth is that evil has taken over this country. The evil as we know it. I'm not talking about any religious evil.
I agree, of course. Yeah.
I'm talking about general evil.
Yeah.
So, and you can tell without being told the outcome. Why Machiavelli was speaking to doing good is that maybe he was also speaking to institutions and structures that can sustain good.
Yes.
They don't exist here.
Yeah.
He probably was also speaking to consequences of not doing good for a long time.
Yes.
Those don't exist here. There's no consequence for doing evil in Nigeria. In fact, the only consequences we have here is against those who do good, not those who do evil. All the evil men I've known since I was born have lasted longer than the good people that I know in this country. They don't die. They have built the best mansions. Yes. They drove the nicest cars. They lived the best lives. Evil people. Yeah. But every weekend, you always get news of the death of a good man. Yeah. The guy who didn't take bribe when he was in custom has died. Yeah. The policeman who rejected gratification has been kicked out homeless and then he died miserable. The teacher who did his work has died. But the principal who was selling question is still alive. The army general who did not believe in the country he came to govern is still alive. The president who stole the most amount of money, possibly, some of them at least, are still alive. And they are in their 90s. The ones who committed the biggest amount of genocide, they're in their 90s in this country. Yeah. But the people that tried to stop it, or who said, I can't do this, have all died. So you must consider where you are in looking at this holistically.
No, I do agree. I think that philosophical guidance is important, because I think about it all the time, like, maybe there has to be another way, like, because I just feel like watching good intention people like yourself, man, like, it's so heartbreaking that someone like yourself may never get to lead this. I mean, you're still quite young, so who knows? Who knows? God may change something in Nigeria and Sowore will become president tomorrow.
We don't know, and I'm not the type who doesn't give up.
Yeah.
And the reason is this. If you were here with me, if we sat across each other in 1994, you would swear that I could never graduate from the university. I graduated. It just happened overnight. They just came and called me and said, oh, the new vice chancellor wants to see you. And that's how I graduated. If anybody told you when I was leaving Unilag that I would be alive beyond the age of 25, you would not believe it. I'm 54 years old. So even though I am a fundamental pessimist, I expect the worst and hope for the best. I think my pessimism has some critical optimism with it. That stuff could happen in such a way that it won't just be me. It's just a lot of people just rise to the position of power, that I had been advocated for, fought for, that may not even be me. And this happened when the military rule ended. Just one day, Abacha just died. Everybody's like, what? At that time, everybody had already made up their mind that Abacha would be the next president of Nigeria in civilian gap. And it happened. But the downside to it is that a few days later, Abiola too was dead. And that was a hope of the democratic future at that time. So Nigeria has dealt with me in such a way that I'm very knowledgeable about the fact that miracles don't happen here. But I also understand that stuff could happen, and that the tables could turn.
Yeah, I hope it does. I hope it happens. And I mean, you're right. Nigeria is the best case example or scenario of where things can turn on a dime like this. Let's talk about someone who Nigerians, or most Nigerians at least on the surface level, has accepted, Peter Obi. So this is the contrast, right? Peter Obi has been known by Nigerians, not on the national level, but at least I'm from Anambra State, so I've known Peter Obi for as long as, before he ran and when he was governor as well. I was in Nigeria then, so I know very well who Peter Obi is. And I'm also one of his biggest critics as well at this little level I'm operating at. But one thing that we cannot say for certain is that on the surface level, at least on social media, at the youth level, most youths or most people on social media, they've accepted Peter Obi. What are your thoughts on Peter Obi?
There's something that I've also seen as a general strategy to promote Peter Obi is to insert him into every conversation that people like us have, knowing that. But I will.
I mean, the reason why
I'll put it this way. You understand? Except somebody who doesn't know numbers, even the acceptability of the Peter Obi you are talking about pales in comparison to Buhari's acceptance when he first ran for office, in which he got 12 million votes against Obasanjo, and I think Obasanjo got 24 at that time, even though we know they made up the numbers. He ran again. That 12 million votes has been a constant or a recurring decimal in figures. And that time there was no social media. But these votes were coming in. So he was also seen as the most accepted person at that time as against those who win elections. So, but like I said, I think the strategy these days is to inject Peter Obi into every conversation so that you can keep the myth that it's accepted. But if you look at the numbers, I'm talking about their own numbers now, it doesn't look to me that this assertion is true. You can say that about some young people. You can say that about even some old people. You can say that about certain demographics, Christians, for instance, and some of
course,
them,
Christians,
Northern Christians, who, in their response to the Muslim ticket, was looking for somebody, and he fit into their bill. But if you want to have a honest conversation about acceptance, I don't think you're diving deep enough to get it. But you have excused it by saying this is on the surface.
Yeah, social media and
yes.
stuff, yeah.
So, but you know that's
it's not real life.
It's not real.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
In terms of even the outcomes of their own elections.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it. But now that you got him injected into this conversation.
But what do you think of his personality? What do you think of him?
I know him as far back as 2007 or thereabout, when he was cheated out of the governorship at first, and he was introduced to me, not in person, but his situation, by a friend of mine I respect a lot, Ken Dibe, from Anambra State as well. He's a great writer. And he said, this is Peter Obi guy. We were all in the US at that time, and he's been cheated. And we went to work. Never met him. In fact, I met Peter Obi for the first time with Chinua Achebe.
Wow.
At an Achebe lecture several years later, I think, when he was now already governor. So he came and he was telling Achebe, Ojukwu was there too, and he came back. This was the day I knew that Ojukwu spoke Yoruba fluently because I interviewed him.
Okay.
And it's still on the internet. And he said to Achebe, he said, I'm meeting Sowore for the first time. This guy was the one who made me governor. And Achebe is like, yeah, I'm not sure because Achebe and I were close. His family, myself, before, he died. I mean, I sought Achebe out on my own. He's someone I've always loved. His books and his intellect.
Yeah.
So, and then Peter Obi said, can we meet upstairs? And I said to him, please, I'm not doing all this meet upstairs. And my witness was his person at that time, Valentine Obinyam. That was his special advisor on publicity. Very rabid guy like that. So, and a few years later, they came and said, this guy is such a substandard, liar. And we started evaluating Peter Obi's performance and found out that everything you heard in terms of publicity, and that's the way he was packaged this time around, was the opposite. Substandard buildings or things that were never done. They were packaging him.
Mediocrity.
Yes, it was mediocre. We got upset. And we started digging into it. I'm telling you for the first time to his governance and found him to be a fake, as fake as they'd come.
I agree, 100%.
And he got upset. They went and printed posters in Anambra State. I think it was done by, Valentine, accusing me and Okedibe of being gay partners. So that's why I also knew that all the social media rabid attacks, he endorses it.
Yeah.
That's how he operates. But, he'll maintain dignified distance and act like if he sees you, greet you like.
Yeah.
But besides that facade, Peter Obi can lie.
Yeah.
When we were running for election, I noticed something about him. If Peter Obi wants to take a private jet, he will go and enter through commercial place. So he'll greet everybody, you think, and then they'll bring a vehicle and put him to go to the private jet area. One day we arrived and we came to campaign and I think we were both in Lagos. We arrived on the same flight. This one was a commercial flight. And he waited for me. Maybe they didn't deliberate at the entrance of the plane. And I greeted him. By that very time, we took pictures. I had not left. I posted the picture myself, and these people were like, Sowore has bowed down for Obi. But here is the next part. So we entered the vehicle. I saw him entering a vehicle, and I followed. Turns out he was going to the private section where they treat VIPs.
Oh.
And then saw him with a whole coterie of, I said, but you came alone and they were all there. Apparently, those ones probably flew on a private jet.
Okay.
But he decided to fly commercial. And I now asked the guy who was driving, because we were in a car, a Hilux van. I said, let's wait and see what Peter Obi drives. Because I was actually expecting that he was driving, was the Innocent Motors.
Okay.
Peter Obi had nothing less than 10 big Toyota SUVs waiting for him. There was this Mercedes space bus. And I was telling myself, why do you have to lie? So why do you have to cover up all this? Nobody's going to be upset with you that you're a presidential candidate if you have a convoy. But look at this trajectory. And that packaging is his style.
Yeah.
And if you want to get away with finding out, then he'll send his people after you. Yeah. So when you saw that I stood my ground in 2023 against him, I knew him. And he knew that I knew him. But there were guys who were against him in those days who didn't have the courage to come out again because they were afraid of the backlash. And they did a fantastic job of scaring everybody.
Yeah, for some people, it may work for some people. For some others, it only adds the fire to them to keep on speaking out.
So that's like I said, you wanted to hear this. Now you know it.
No, I've always known. The reason why I bring it up is kind of linking back to what we said about before. Like, for me, I always feel why did they choose Obi, at least on the surface level.
No, let me explain to you a very succinct explanation. And see, after NSAS, anybody who is a student of politics or history knows that the young people who fought a system they never thought could capitulate, because the system capitulated under NSAS.
It was shaky. Yeah.
It was shaking to its core. And they saw it. They usually go for power. And when that happened, he was presented to them as the new face of the struggle. And it was all packaging, like I said. The elites came and said, look, if we allow one young person or all these young people to go with a person we can't talk to, we are finished. So they had to invest in that. And that was what produced him. And the people that did it know themselves. They were the NSAS connoisseurs. The people who made it through NSAS, who became popular NSAS, they all rallied themselves together. And I was aware when they were planning it. But I said, how can you do this? Because this guy is establishment boy. Those were the first set of people that started attacking us. And I can mention their names. Aisha, we were in a group. Macaroni was there, Deji Adeyoju, Aisha, Faz, Femi Falan. We were in a group after NSAS, and Aisha kept saying, whomever is here, you should go and run for local government to House of Rep. And one day I called her, I said, who's going to be president? She said, I don't care. Just make sure that anybody, we go and take over. So I called our people, I said, look at the game Aisha is playing. They already have a candidate. At that time, I didn't know it was Peter Obi. But they had been working on that ground before that time to present him as a candidate. And they had prepared who was going to be a stumbling block and how they were going to attack everybody and overwhelm everybody so that nobody can oppose their decision. It was a tyranny of a minority.
Yeah.
Even Wole Soyinka confessed to me that he fell for it, up to a point. He's like, I was almost endorsing this guy. And then he woke up one day and his name was all over, and he said he was asking, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? It turns out they just picked on him for no reason. And he became, even though he didn't participate in the election, he became, the most ridiculed person after the election. That was what got him upset.
Yeah.
And he said, if this is my last assignment on earth, I'm going to let people know who you people are. Yeah, so.
No, he didn't hold back in my interview with him as well.
Before your interview, he had not. Anywhere he was asked this kind of question, his answer was harsher.
Exactly.
But mine is more analytical.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just as someone who wants to learn more about the mechanics of power, like how does power work, like the mechanics of power and politics, like how does politics really work, and how does media work. I can remember, like a few years ago, I didn't really understand how important information warfare was. Like I was quite naive.
Yeah.
It was like I was listening to one podcast, Tim Pool, and I'm sure you know Tim Pool and Steve Bannon.
Yes.
And Steve Bannon talked about 3 kinds of warfare according to Sun Tzu. I had read Sun Tzu before, but it didn't stick to me what he was going to say. 3 kinds of warfare: kinetic warfare, information warfare, and economic warfare. And I've always thought about information warfare. What does that mean? Like how? And obviously, as time went, and okay, this is how information warfare works. This is how propaganda works. This is how you can package, in my opinion, a failed governor in Anambra State, and you can wash him and you can paint him to become this God-like figure, this saint who has never committed a sin before. Who, in my opinion, if you went to Anambra State is a failed state. Anambra State is not working. All the roads they built are substandard. They've all spoiled today. And in my opinion, he didn't really work till his last year in office. He then began doing something. Like for the first 7 years before, obviously there was some cuts when the courts asked him to leave. But in the 7 years he was in power, or in the 7 years before the 8 years,
I don't even think this needs an explanation.
No, the reason why I'm saying is
in my view,
someone else who is out there might be listening to this and might not know, because let's talk for example.
Let me tell
SARS,
you, there will still be someone else out there, or a majority, who have been so brainwashed.
Yeah, but I think it's also important for
that
us.
They would. You see, the biggest fear of people who engage in information warfare. Warfare, and especially the ones who add cancellation to it.
Yes,
is how to retreat. Because it is always worse if they retreat. Because everybody is now waiting for them in the corner. Both those they deceive, people that were collateral damages to it. And, in the history of this country, I think maybe, because I wasn't around during the Civil War, maybe this level of information warfare was probably more deployed during the Civil War than I've seen in recent times. You can talk about Buhari's time, but internet was young.
Exactly.
The internet penetration was little during Buhari's period. And that one was a little bit different in the sense that there was at least a country that felt like things are not going well. But this one is people jamming down information.
This one is more sophisticated. It's much more sophisticated.
And saying to you, you better eat it. If you don't, you can't leave. So, and that's the way it happened. And it didn't spare anybody. Interestingly, I predicted it in our own cycle. I said, prepare for this. Because it got to a point, even some of the guys I know who can withstand stuff like that had to they ran away. It was like
pressure becomes too much.
They were so scared to be labeled as being anti what had been presented as the only alternative.
Yeah, but how can you package someone who oversaw the worst SARS killing in Nigeria?
It doesn't matter.
SARS, I interviewed one of the ladies who lost her brothers to SARS in Anambra State. And I was on Anambra when this happened. I know when the 50 dead bodies were seen floating in Ezu River, and I was there. I know when it happened. I was on Anambra then when I was in Unizik.
Okay.
So I knew how the state felt. Like it was a shock to everyone in the States. How can you wake up one morning and suddenly dead bodies are floating in the river? And then suddenly we turn this governor who oversaw that because he was governor when it happened. But what obedience do is to say, oh, he doesn't have power over SARS. But those same obedience criticize Sanwo-Olu over NSAS. So which one is it? And as governor of the state, every Nigerian knows you have power in your state. You have the last say. You cannot say that SARS you don't know what SARS is doing. Every Nigerian knows that SARS was this extrajudicial.
Look, you know what I would want to say? Now that we've spoken about Obi, can we move on? I know you love. The reason I'm saying that is that
our job. I think our job is also
your job, my job, would never finish over. It's not just a lot of people did not know Babangida until he launched a book. That was the kind of aura he created around himself when he was military head of state. You could not criticize him. He created guys who said Babangida was God. There were judges who proclaimed Babangida Kabiesi, that you can't bring a case against Babangida in front of them. There was this information minister, Alex Akinyele, who said that he would rather, let me just extremely say that he would rather keep his head inside his rear than breathe normal air. So you find that from time to time in history. And these are not accidents, they are contrived. So what I'm saying is it's also important for us to move past those kind of conversations. And also use them as benchmarks for things that, as the Chinese say, never again.
Yeah, but I think our job is also to educate ourselves and see how the game is being played. Like, for me personally, my job as I think doing this little stuff I'm doing on this media stuff is to educate my audience on how politics works, on how the mechanics of politics work, on how information warfare, propaganda, how it works. For me, I'm fascinated by it. I love it. I love seeing how these things work. Like, I love seeing how politics is being played, how the social media works. And for me, it's just so fascinating to me to just see how you can take someone like that and suddenly the guy becomes a national figure. that everyone must worship.
But if you look at it, everybody has done that for presidents. Somebody also
on this level,
somebody packaged Tinubu too.
Yeah, but on
with
this
all
level,
his drug history, and said it doesn't matter. The only difference is that they did not care, and they also probably were more subtle in the sense that they didn't say to you like, "Oh, he's not."
Exactly.
He doesn't say. They're like, "Yeah, we're not sure that he was selling drugs." If you know, and then when you presented the evidence, like, so what? He was selling drugs, but the penalty wasn't the penalty for people selling drugs. It was for somebody whose account was accidentally used, to collect OPay, So they were more like subtle. But if you look at it at the end of the day, everybody was trying to present their worst as the best so that they can get Nigeria to bow to their political agenda. And in every case, we know all these people.
Yeah.
Every other thing behind it is to look at it and say, hey, how do we counter AC? Who's likely to come out and say this guy is bad? And in their WhatsApp group, they said, we're going to keep saying that he has a bad hair. That's our talking point. Yeah. How do we counter Shoyinka? Oh, let's just say that he has corn in his pocket, and get some artists to draw his hair with corn in it. And how do we counter Sowore? Oh, let's just say that Sowore brought Buhari to power. That would be that talking point. But when you look at it, ask yourself, if they didn't choose Obi as a candidate in 2020, do you know who they were going to choose?
Who?
Osinbajo. That was their candidate. In fact, it was Osinbajo that first provided some of the Christian leaders that started working with Obi, because that was the original candidate. And Osinbajo was Buhari's deputy. So if you hated Buhari, as you claimed, why is Osinbajo? Why are you in love with his deputy? They never hated Buhari. They wanted power. And they were going to go get it using whomever was available or acceptable, not who was desirable. Operating word, desirable.
Yeah. I mean, looking forward to 2 years from now, do you think he stands a chance?
Who?
Peter Obi.
Anybody stands a chance in this republic. In fact, you'll be surprised that in 2 years' time, Obi may not even have a political party. And they'll bring another person. Or Obi may not even run as a president. Maybe he might run as a deputy to someone. Because his people are already preparing the public for whomever he becomes. You get my point?
Yes.
If he joins an armed robbery gang, they'll tell you that, let him just rob until we get power, he will change. If he joins a kidnapping gang, I'm like, hey, how many people did he kidnap, Seth? Let's forget about it. Because just like you mentioned Steve Bannon, I think there's a similarity with what Steve and the rest of them did for Trump. Everybody said, oh, Trump didn't pay tax. Like, forget about it. It's not his fault. It's the tax people that didn't collect tax. Oh, he touched a woman inappropriate. Like, what's your problem? That's not even his type. You say, oh, he is a racist. Like, why did you go rent a house where you can't afford to pay for it? You say, he doesn't care about, black people. And like, hey, what do you want him to do? Is he black? You say, he doesn't like people, with different sexual orientations. You say, oh, if he does, would he be sleeping with one of them? So, and they got away with that and brought him back. And he's back now doing exactly what I've always wanted him to do, which is to shut down the U.S. that pretends to be friendly towards human rights and become a nation of supremacists.
I mean, I disagree with you on Trump, but if we have time, we'll come back to it eventually.
But see, that's the problem with some of you. It's the problem with some of you is that you will not like you will hate your own Trump, but embrace the Trump of America.
I'm a nationalist. I think it is okay for Americans to be nationalists. There's nothing wrong with loving your country.
No, it's
or wanting America
but the
first.
question you should ask yourself: is this what Americans want?
But that's what I mean.
Because we're just discussing here.
He's president, so that means America wants that.
No,
Trump is president, so that means
you can be president of any country and not have, circumstances bring about presidents in any country that are not just about elections.
Well, according to exit polls, immigration and inflation played a critical role in Trump's victory.
So why are they not playing any critical role now that food prices have still remained?
No, but they're coming down. Petrol prices in I don't know. I don't live in this state.
Maybe,
I'm talking of
maybe
what
you
I
should
see
get
on Twitter.
Yeah, so Twitter doesn't pay for food.
Well, when people show on X the price of fuel under Biden and the price of fuel under Trump, I think that's a fact, right? That is coming down under Trump.
No. It's what you see on X these days is how Elon Musk feels.
This information.
That's you've talked about it.
No, I mean, I don't think it's what Elon Musk feels. I mean, Twitter is quite open these days. It's quite open. It's quite
I don't think so.
Under Jack Dorsey, under Musk is much more open.
No. I think when you get to another 4 years. You reverse some of your position.
No, really.
I don't even think it will last 4 years. No,
not really.
Because Americans are already, reversing position on what they thought was going to bring for them.
Doge is still very popular. I mean, I'm an outsider. You would know better about your superior knowledge on it.
It's not supreme knowledge. It is. I don't know because I've not lived there. I've not been there. I just came back from the US.
Yeah, perhaps that's what I'm saying.
But I also probably read more than X.
I do agree because I've not been there. I'm only speaking as an outsider. And for me, I look at Trump and there are things that I love about him. Not just things, many things I love about him that I feel like if as a Nigerian, if we can have some of that in Nigeria.
That's what somebody said to me, that this is an American white person, that Nigerians outside of the US love Trump the most, outside of his US supporters. Said outside of the US. I think Russians like Trump the most outside of the US. But I think a good number of Nigerians are in love with Trump. And I think it stems from our colonial days.
Not really.
We've always loved things that are esoteric in nature.
Not really. Like for me, I'm a political student. Like I studied politics and I love politics. I don't look at things the way you say the average guy in the street looks at things. I look at things quite.
But I think
and I ask myself, right? Do I like the transgender ideology in my schools? I don't like it. That's what the left.
No, but see, but that's what so that's what you are presented with.
No, but that's a fact.
So that you can
even in the UK,
you can arrive at certain conclusions.
But even in the UK, right? Like people say, when America sneezes, the world catches a cold, right? All this nonsense you see happening in America, bit by bit, the world flows into the whole world. In the UK, kids of 7 years old are being taught homosexuality.
Yeah,
in schools. Is that what I want in my school? No, I don't want that. In my that's just
an aspect of.
No, but it's one of so many things that the left does that is wrong.
But you also would agree with me, that kids who are learning what you said you don't like, homosexuality, are not a problem in reality. It's better, but what about the kids? What about the kids that have been wiped out in Gaza?
No, of course.
Even those ones are not homosexuals.
So
what I'm saying is that you are presented with options that can rile you up.
Like I said,
whereas America also does like.
Yeah, I'm quite subjective. This is the one issue I disagree with Trump.
But I think those issues should be left with their society to address.
Yeah, of course.
But the ones that affects us as members of, this global community where America is a policeman. We should be free to discuss it and not accept our.
Who made America the policeman, though? This is the thing I don't.
No,
like.
Did
God wake up and
say,
"Let us
God,
make America"?
Of course,
I don't like this idea of America being.
America was made
for us.
America was made the policeman of the world
after World War II.
Because they have superior firepower.
Yeah, post World War II.
That's what makes people.
Yeah, but thank God they're losing it now. We no longer live in a unipolar world. We live in a multipolar world now.
We don't know yet.
No, but we are. We do.
So
the facts bear it out.
that's something that we should discuss more about.
But do you like it though? Let's talk about this now. Now we're talking about.
Yeah.
Do you like the fact we live in a multipolar world today?
Oh, that's always been my dream.
Exactly.
My whole Pan-Africanism is an Africa that is not a pushover.
Perfect.
Yes. In the scheme of things globally. Yes. That's exactly why I'm not only sticking out my neck for a Nigeria that is powerful, but an Africa that is united, prosperous, and also powerful. I don't like a unipolar world. Exactly. A unipolar world is too cold for me.
Too risky, too dangerous.
Yes. So, and I've been in a world that's been mostly unipolar my entire life.
Yeah, we have. Yeah. Up to 2016, 2017,
yes. So
we're in a unipolar world.
I participated in second slavery. So I know what it is. Yes.
Yeah,
voluntary.
But I think we all should be happy as Africans that we live in a multipolar world now, because when America
the monopolar world you are living in,
the multipolar world,
yes, it's still a place where Africa is a minor player. So Africans can only benefit from multipolar words or bipolar word. Bipolar is an operating word.
Yeah, that was
bipolar word is the one that we were in when the
Soviet
Russians
Union and America.
We were just being subjected to mood swings between two power blocks, the East Bloc and the West Bloc. And we're somehow back to it now, but in a more stylish way, you understand? So what we call a multipolar world is still a bipolar world in which there are other players, multinationals.
But I think what Africa didn't have before that Africa has now is, look at what Tinubu said when Tinubu when he was elected. Tinubu was asked by I didn't see, but I read it on papers that he was asked by the journalist why America wasn't keen on congratulating him when he won. If you remember, they kind of waited. The British immediately congratulated Tinubu. The French did the same, but America was kind of cold feet towards his election, and he was asked, "What does he think?" And Tinubu was like, "If they don't, he will just go to the Chinese." An African president would never, a president of an African country will never speak that way in the past. That you will say.
But what has that brought to you?
No, but the point I'm making is, I'm not trying to justify.
Saying that what I'm trying to tell you is that if you're a student of history, that has always been there.
No, not really. Not really.
No,
they could,
it was worse.
No, America could do what
Africa was the testing ground for this bipolar agenda.
No option. There was no option.
That's why there was war in Angola.
No, but the point
in Mozambique.
The point I'm making
that was why apartheid lasted for long.
The point I'm making is you had no option.
There was always been a Chama Mao that Africans went to. Yeah. It was the reason why this man was overthrown in Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah.
Yeah,
because he didn't listen to Americans, even though he went to American university.
I didn't mention Russia. I mentioned China.
No.
Sorry, Tinubu mentioned China.
Yeah.
He didn't mention Russia.
I'm telling you that there used to be an East Bloc made up of China and the USSR.
That was more
of which the USSR was the biggest power player. But they've always been around. And Africa has always been a place where they play. And I'm just warning you.
Yeah.
And advising. Well, not let me use the word warning. But I'm advising that you are cautious about the optimism that what is playing out now is a multipolar world in which the African continent is benefiting. No. The African continent will benefit from a multipolar world when Africa has the capacity and the resources to produce and to create wealth, prosperity, and unite. So until that happens, until Africa itself as a continent becomes a China, or an American, or America as it is, or even Canada, this idea that we are in some kind of multipolar world in which we are benefiting because people are constructing highways for us, which we should be doing ourselves, or helping us to get loans, which then puts us back into a bind, is not the multipolar world that we should be proud of.
Two things can be true at the same time. Every continent or every country needs help.
No, I'm trying to tell you that it happened before.
No, I do agree. I see the points you're making, but the point I'm also making is the African continent needs help. Needs technology.
The Africans didn't need help. No, but Africans put themselves in a situation where they were walking around with begging bowls.
The technology that we
instead of creating
the tech that we need
the
to make
value.
Africa.
and adding the value that could have made Africa a competitor. It was while Africa was sleeping with all these crazy leaders that Japan rose from ashes after the Second World War. Brazil, India, So until the continent of Africa is able to also produce its own nuclear weapons or have it.
We don't even need it really.
When you say nuclear weapons, you are not talking about how to kill other people. It also might be nuclear power.
Energy, nuclear energy.
Give you nuclear energy. Yeah. What I'm saying is that the competition that you want is not the competition of whose bowl is biggest. That is why the conversation about USAID is of importance to some people, because Africa has been reduced to this continent that is waiting for USAID to create jobs for their doctors and nurses. And it's easy to say, USAID is funding Boko Haram and all that, and we should stop giving money to Africa. But the person who is advancing it is one of the biggest defense contractors in the US, Elon Musk. If you know how much he makes every day for everything that he throws up in the air, you'll be shocked. So, but it's easy because Africa is not a player. Even Saudi Arabia as a country is treated with better respect than Africa.
Because Saudi Arabia is a developed country.
Exactly. So if you don't get there,
I think we're both saying the same
so
thing.
Yes, if you don't get there, and it's just about the size of your begging bowl, you're begging for technology, begging for aid, begging for science, you're begging for teachers, you're begging for nurses, you're begging for food, you're begging for even sexual protection, condoms. So you're not there. And until we have that concrete conversation about an Africa Renaissance that's not just about buzzwords.
The point I'm making is, and I get the view you're advancing, but the point I'm making is, in a multipolar world, when we were in a unipolar world, America could do whatever she liked. The 6 countries America defeated in the past, Libya, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, all those countries that she went to war against, that was in a unipolar world. In the world of today, America cannot do that. America cannot just say, let's go through and take away Gaddafi. She can't do that today.
Yeah, you
because
sure?
In a multiple, Trump, who I love, tried to do that in Venezuela. In his first time, he couldn't do it in Venezuela.
No, because
he couldn't take away Maduro.
Yes, I'm sure you say you love Trump.
No, but that's the point I'm making. Right? In a multipolar world,
so
America cannot
even in a
do
unipolar world, there are places they couldn't defeat.
No, but look at what they did in Libya. In a unipolar world, Libya fell.
Let me remind you.
Afghanistan fell. All
Cuba
these countries fell.
Is 90 miles from the US. Why couldn't they defeat Cuba?
Yeah, but we are talking of. This is.
I'll give you an example.
No, we are comparing.
They didn't succeed everywhere.
We are comparing apples to oranges. Of course, they're not going to succeed everybody. The point is,
so
they succeeded in these other cases.
I'm telling you that America has advanced enough today not to need to even go to Libya to kill Gaddafi.
You and I know there is an ongoing conversation about going to war against Iran. You and I know that, right? Iran is the next country, right?
Yeah. The conclusion we need to make.
Yeah.
You may not accept.
Yeah.
Is that the overly optimistic
position
that somehow Africa is benefiting from a multipolar disagreement amongst the world is not.
No, at least we have options. That's the point I'm making.
Which options do you have? To go and beg from China?
Not really beg.
And then
even the Chinese had to beg at some point.
That's the point.
The Chinese had to beg at some point.
They're
not going to beg now.
They're not begging.
No, but Chinese
in
had to beg.
2025.
No, but of course, is the point.
If you all started at the same time, a country like Nigeria, was paying salaries of workers in Cuba. They're providing electricity to several West African countries. 2025, they can't refine their oil.
Yeah.
So what are we benefiting?
I think we are both saying the point I'm making is
probably maybe we should agree that we're saying the same thing.
No. Let's talk about.
I am not a Trumpite.
No, of course. I've always known that. But the point before we went on this detail, let's just finish and put a pin to this part of our talk. I never even this was not part of my question, but since we entered this, I wanted us to continue. The point I'm making is every country, every continent needs help. The Chinese after their 100 years of humiliation needed help as well from America. When Bill Clinton accepted the Chinese into WTO, I'm sure you know this history. China became what it became today. So at some point, the Chinese in their transition after communism and everything, needed the help of the Americans. So every country needs help. Africa finds itself in this stage of its development where it needs the help of another power to help her become what she needs to become. If we have smart leaders, they will make use of that help, develop the continent, develop the country, take the loans, take the funds, build the best roads, build the best schools, build the best hospitals, get the technology that we need, the 5D, the 4D, whatever we need to develop, the ships, whatever we need to develop our continent, we'll bring it down here. And at some point become the China that China is today. But every continent, every country needs that help. What wasn't happening before was America was not willing to give that to Africa. All America did was use USAID, which we're going to talk about since you mentioned it, to overthrow countries and to funnel funds to this and this. But yes, they did some good by providing antiretroviral drugs to those with HIV and AIDS. But the point is, the Chinese, compared to America,
I don't want you to
compared to America,
walk
the
away
Chinese,
with the impression or the conclusion you are making that, I'm not defending USAID. So that when we get there,
let's talk about USAID now.
So, but what I don't want you to get away with is the position that somehow your love for a multipolar world is going to somehow resolve the illusion.
No, that's not
that Africa has no option except it produces, except it prospers, except it's self-sustaining after self-realization and evaluation. So nothing solves the problem. If it is just to increase the size of our begging bowls,
not really. I mean, I think,
of course, you will get more aids.
I think
more arms, but no progress.
I think for me, multipolar world, of course, it has its own disadvantages. But the point is, at least we can.
Nobody's going to be an island in a world like this. I understand that, but I'm just saying.
I see the points you're making. Let's talk about. You mentioned USAID. For me, one of the things I didn't like about the whole conversation with USAID was it seemed as if lots of Nigerians were taking away the agency of our leaders when it came to USAID. Some Nigerians are making this argument that because of USAID, Nigeria is where it is today. And for me, I feel like our leaders also have responsibility and agency when it comes to where Nigeria is today. Regardless of whatever USAID is or didn't do, I do agree. You can't not see the facts and be like, USAID did not do lots of bad things. Of course, they did lots of wrongs in Nigeria and Africa. But the point still remains that our leaders still have agency. They could have built the roads. They could have built the hospital. They could have done all these things that they should have done. But I think many Nigerians fell into this trap of America, USAID is the root of all evil. Once you take it away, everything gets solved. And I don't think that's the right answer.
Also, what I noticed when the argument was happening is that it was a defining moment for African Trumpists. Say, yes, we don't need aid, and all that. And I agree, we don't need aid. And the way Africans are treated is because of the kind of leaders Africans have tolerated. Because anybody who understands resources very well, you know that people who are giving you aid are taking, before they give you $100 million, they've taken $50 to $100 billion of your resources.
Nothing is free.
That is why the multinationals are doing better than the countries they are operating from on the continent of Africa, whether they are digging gold, oil, bauxite, or they are digging bitumen or diamonds. It is what Africans must realize. And I agree with you. I'm not even as mild as you. African leaders have been useless. That is why all these organizations that are bringing aid come to you, and it depends on who is there. Some of the agenda of these organizations are very direct. Some of them hate the fact that Africa is going to be very populated, and out of this huge population might come some genie out of the bottle, and they want to stop it. They don't hide it. So the people that came to carry you away as slaves don't love you. And there are children who are still excusing slavery. don't love you either. But what is missing in that conversation is excitement, in which it was almost sounding like messianic, like, oh my God, Trump came to help Africa. See, he has frozen USID. We love you. We love Elon Musk, not knowing that Elon Musk didn't like South African blacks. He wanted to use whatever he can to punish them. And it didn't take long before they started taking on South Africans. But the question you should ask yourself is that, so you hate USAID, which makes sense because of the bad they have done. But you also love people who feels that children in Gaza should be wiped out, with the amount of money that goes to the state of Israel to do harm to Palestinians is nothing compared to what Africa is getting from USAID. So why is there no outrage that we're sending bombs to kill innocent Palestinians, but you're happy that USAID is taking money, which is fine. If Africa were to get it wrong, you should be sending money to some of them. Venezuela, which you mentioned earlier, when I was the time I was in New York when Chavez was in power.
Hugo Chavez,
He used to send heating oil to a part of New York known as the Bronx.
Wow.
Yes, because they were doing so well. And America didn't like that. They went after him. To today, they can't explain why the guy had cancer. Which you can say is conspiracy theory. But countries like that are doing well, they never liked them. They didn't like Brazil. They created an uprising in Brazil through the guy who lost election to Lula. Bolsonaro, what is it? Bolsonaro.
Jair Bolsonaro.
Yeah. Bolsonaro. So when you have all these things, you understand the world order. But the world order cannot be devoid of reason. It should not be devoid of critical thinking.
Yeah.
That don't, because somebody sell a narrative to you, lose your sense to think that the reason they don't want to fund through USAID is because they love you. No, it is not. It is because they need to sell a narrative out there. That's a trap. And the way Nigerians took it, especially the people who were making the argument, then became very political. I think at that time it was, yes, USAID made Jonathan lose the election. So
yeah, that was one of the.
Let's go after everybody.
Yeah, that
whose
was
name has ever appeared on USAID.
I was so disappointed.
No, I wasn't disappointed because it is part of the kind of political conversation we've been having of how people were mutating over time in terms of Nigerian politics. Because they couldn't hide it. Eventually it came out. But ask yourself, why did the USAID story die down? Why suddenly are we not talking about it anymore? Who finally found out the holy grail that USAID wasn't? The issue was not USAID, but it was local politics being interwoven with the blackmail of, I think some people wanted to bring Jonathan back. And they felt like, let's use this. And then they came up with this USAID narrative that completely left out the world order as it is evolving now, driven by the USA new administration.
Yeah. But do you when obviously I think it was mentioned that Sahara Reporters, which you own, received some of this funding. Is it true, or was it?
No, but Sahara Reporters never received funding from
USAID or
never. But
how
there's
about
nothing
funding from other sources.
No, there's never a time that Sahara Reporters funding was hidden. I've spoken about them publicly. It's written. In fact, anybody that mentions Sahara Reporters saw it based on what was publicly written and revealed. I started Sahara Reporters around with a laptop that I purchased, but when it evolved, I did apply for grants that helped to expand the platform. And it might sound cheeky, but any idea that you want to grow, you must collaborate with people.
You need help.
Yes,
you need help.
When there's a story which may not be entirely true, it might be urban legend, that the guys who started Yahoo, the first check they got from, I think, somebody who was at Microsoft, They didn't even have a bank account. I think it was 100,000.
Yeah.
So, and when you look at it overall, if you've ever gone to a university, you probably have benefited from a US grant. You know, if you've ever gone to a hospital to get treated, you've benefited from a grant from some of these foundations who are doing good and bad. So I'm not in any way defending that, because before you know it, they will say, oh, you're trying to be defensive. Right? The fact that I even lived in the US is bad enough, right? For 25 years.
Yeah.
So but there's nothing hidden about any grants that was ever made to Sahara reporters that I personally didn't talk about. I was not publicly available.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me ask you, I mean, let's just stay on this. I know we've talked about this, staying on the USAID topic. One of the journalists who talked about USAID and his influence in Nigeria and Jonathan and everybody is David Hudain. I've had him on my podcast twice. Respect him. I think he's one of the, best investigative journalists we have in Nigeria as per what he's tried to uncover in the country. He's a really nice guy. I don't know what you think about him, but really nice guy, great guy. David, he's very eloquent. He's talked about these issues. And I feel like there seems to be some sort of rivalry between you and him. You know who I'm talking about, right? David Hudain. Journalist, you know what I'm talking about.
Let me tell you.
What's the issue?
Let me tell you something. And I find it very fascinating. After I started Sahara Reporters, every big journalist said he won't succeed.
Yeah.
I remember when I interviewed Obasanjo's son, Gbenga Obasanjo, which was the beginning of Sahara Reporters in 2006. Reuben Abati was probably the biggest columnist in Nigeria at that time. He wrote this skating in this thing that I wasn't practicing journalism. It was ambush. And then every other website that emerged after Sahara Reporters, first of all, take a poke shot at Sahara. Sahara is terrible, or they'll write something negative about me. I can't count now, but all of them. And I realized that is what happened to Pathfinders. You will be, there's this quotation I have under my email. It's, I think it was Arthur Schopenhauer. He said, every truth confronts, goes through 3 stages. So one, you're ridiculed. And secondly, I think you are threatened. And finally, it becomes self-evident. I met David by accident. I didn't know who he was. One day he wrote me that
he wrote to you.
Yeah, he sent me a message that he had a big story that he was working on, and the platform he was working with had chickened out. He wanted to write about the Minister of Communication, Pantami. Some investigative report he had cobbled together. And they said, please, can you help use Sahara Reporters to police it? I can't wait, because that's always been me. I support any new idea. And that's like you mentioned that I helped you. When cable was being set up, I did help them. People's Gazette, Premium Times. I was the first person who was using Premium Times story that became a household name. And everybody was like, Premium Times is bigger than you. I said, there's enough space. Yeah. So, and that's how I met him. And that story was published. It went viral on Sahara. So then what happens to people over time is not something I look back at. I generally don't even accept comparisons. I'm like, oh, who is greatest? Like you said, he's the greatest investigative journalist.
One of the best, certainly.
Yes.
One of the best in Nigeria.
That is the way it should be. That's how I saw myself when I started Sahara Reporters. And then now you're saying there's a better person.
No.
I'm just don't get me wrong. I'm saying that should be the natural progression of a society. The younger ones should be better than the ones that are older. I'm old now. I don't even do investigative reporting anymore. But I'm glad that even some of the materials that I created became useful to some of them to be where they are today. For instance, the Tinubu's drug story, I was the first to put it out in 2000. I bought Tinubu's drug story from Chicago, from an Illinois high court. It was a federal court in Illinois. I bought it from the archive for $76 in 2008 and put it out. That was the material from which everybody who is talking about his drug history, that was the first documented hard copy that was placed online. You can quote me any day, anywhere. Every other thing that is written about it emerged from that source. But I was probably not the first to know about it. I think some other people have written about it even before me. But the first person to ever put Tinubu's drug history online was myself as Sahara Reporters. Nobody can dispute that. And my life was endangered when I was doing it. But the nature of myself is that I don't complain about certain things. When I go and create some problem, I know the consequences. So I'm not going to tell you that somebody's after me. I knew they would be after me.
Yeah.
I've created enough enemies to last me for the rest of my life. So that in my view is my response to that. But rivalry, I don't see it that way. I don't rival people. But I understand the nuances of people saying, "Who's Ashura? Who doesn't take his? We're better than him." Of course, I want everybody to be better than me. This podcast we're doing, I tried to start it in New York.
Yeah.
Through what I call Sahara FM radio.
Okay.
I was one of the first person to arrange microphones like this to a Nigerian audience. It used to be called Sahara FM.
Wow.
We interviewed Ebenezer Obey. We interviewed K1. Nice. We're trying to make it the softer side of Sahara. But now you do it better than I could ever imagine. Honest Bunch did it better than I've ever. It's a lot of people. Because at that time, we didn't know how to go about it. There was a time I was trying to have a proprietary live stream for Sahara Reporters. I spent money on it and all that. One guy called me one day, a friend of mine said, any problem that has been solved, don't invest your money in it. I said, go and register on YouTube.
Yeah.
Now YouTube became the biggest
of course,
TV station in the world a few years later.
Yeah.
So that's the way I say it. Everybody that can do this better, please.
Yeah, I just wish David, who I know personally, I know him like I said personally, really, really great. I wish you and he yourself, rather than all this back and forth on Twitter against
back and forth between me and him.
I think he referenced in one of his tweets. I can't remember.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Look, it's just like wishing me will be friends with police. You can't get me past my experience with police.
Yeah.
So, Shoyinka said something to me that would never leave me. And it was when I first started getting close to him. And I knew Shoyinka before he left Nigeria, but he didn't know who I was. But when I traveled to the US in 1999, a few years later, I met him in the UK, and that's how we became very close again. And he said, even after he won the Nobel Prize, there was a professor of his in his former university in the UK who still hates him to today. He gave me his name. Say, until that guy dies, there's nothing Shoyinka can do. You would always have people like that in your life.
Yeah.
You understand? People that can never explain why they hate you. Or they offer one or two explanations why they don't like you. That is their nature. So there are people who are called iconoclasts. They hate icons. Do you know that I belong in that category? So sometimes people say to me, this is the most beautiful person. Like, no. I have a problem with Beyonce.
You mentioned Jonathan when we were talking about USAID. Why do you think people suddenly forget how bad things were under Jonathan?
No,
insecurity.
Nigeria is...
Why that sudden rush to whitewash the evil that happened under Jonathan?
If you are talking about Jonathan, what about Babangida?
Yeah.
Didn't you see the number of people at his book launch? So Jonathan is nice. He's not even trying. See, what has kept Jonathan, below the radar is that he was a person who, was it not Achebe that said that the benevolent spirits had cracked the canals for something like that. So he remained humble, because he never thought he would get to where he ever made it to. So if you are accusing him of underperformance, like, I wasn't even expecting to be president. So this is, extras.
He's overachieved already.
Yeah, so he's as overachieved. And that's why I think he moved on with his life. He moved on better with his life than those who relied on him when he was president. I'm sure he's looking at them like, come on, I've moved on. I hope you guys move on too.
Yeah, and I just want to stick on this because I kind of think we kind of glossed over it. In an ex-species you did, you talked about OBJ bringing out Peter Obi so that Atiku will not win. Kind of didn't understand what you meant by that. Can you explain what you meant?
I'm a student of history and power.
Yeah.
I have followed meticulously the history of at least 7 presidents in Nigeria, starting from Babangida, followed by Shonekon, who was in power for 84 days before we drove him out, and then followed by Abacha, that's number 3, followed by Abdul Salam, that's number 4, Obasanjo, number 5, Yaradua, number 6, Jonathan, number 7, Buhari, number 8, 9 actually now with Tinubu. And I hope I become the 10th person, so that I can wipe all of their memories away from you. So what has always happened is that there's a power structure of people who believe they own Nigeria. And they truly do, if you look at how they have succeeded so far. So in the scheme of things, if you ask Obasanjo, who do you hate most between Asiwaju, Tinubu, and Atiku? He hated Atiku most because for him, Atiku was someone who had a dagger, who trusted in his chest but didn't kill him. For him, Atiku was Brutus. And when the opportunity came, they looked at it and said, what is the way these votes come in a way that we can overcome Atiku? That's Obasanjo now. And he decided maybe Obi might have been what we call a Manchurian candidate, a candidate who didn't know that he was being supported. I don't know if he is or not. So and they decided that, look, if the Southeast is left there without a spoiler, there's nobody who can defeat Atiku in Nigeria in this next election, because they barely survived Atiku during Buhari's second term, and that there's no amount of tinkling we can do. So let's bring in Obi. These young people already think he's a good guy. He's packaged them very well. And he would suck away or suck out the votes that could have gone to Atiku. There's no way anybody in the Southeast was voting for Tinubu. Nobody in the Southeast is voting for a candidate that brought a Muslim ticket in the Southeast or South-South. In the course of doing it, the Christian minority in the North lashed in on that and voted massively for Obi. Obasanjo's dream came to pass. But look at it, even the arrangement that INEC made, even in allocating the votes, Atiku, who barely campaigned because we were all presidential candidates, in those days, I once asked him, I said, why are you, that's why they say I'm rude. I saw him, I said, why are you still running for office? You could barely move. He looked at me and said, Sowore, just move, get out of my face. Because during the last election, if Atiku moved one leg, he would stop. Like he needed to catch
a
breath. He looked like, I think I tweeted about it, that he looks like a bag of cement that, had become spoiled. So how Atiku, without much campaign, was able to have 8 million votes? But if you were to add that to half of Obi's votes, Atiku, they would not have been able to explain defeating Atiku in the election. Do Obasanjo hate Atiku? Yes. Then does he hate Tinubu? He does. Does he hate Atiku more because of their unsettled problem when he was vice president to him? The other part is that the part of Nigeria who's like, we just had 8 years of a northern president. How can we go and vote for another northerner, regardless of? That was how the issue was solved. So when you hear people saying, oh, somebody else was working for Tinubu, they are the ones working for Tinubu. And look at it. Who was Obi's president campaign manager? It was chosen by Obasanjo, late Doyin Okukwe. In fact, it was Doyin Okukwe who contacted me to support Obi.
Wow.
And I tweeted about it at that time. And I told him, I said, never in your life should you call me again. So I said, do you not remember what you people did to Abiola? And I never heard from them again. But don't forget, in 2019, when I was running for the first time, Obi himself had called me to support them. And same thing that was my response. I said, so you mean after all these years of exposing Atiku, I will now come and join a corrupt ticket? Because we were discussing this now, a lot of Nigerians have small memory because that's the reason they don't teach history that deep. They don't, most of the people who are obedient now used to be articulated.
Of course,
in 2019.
Yeah.
And then they migrated to, most of them are these PDP, youth vanguard people. And I know them. So what I'm saying is that if you look at this, had the votes that went to be line fallow, Atiku is most likely to benefit from that bulk of votes than Tinubu. Tinubu wasn't even pretending. He wasn't campaigning in the East. They hardly went to, maybe Imo was the furthest they can go. Nobody wanted to hear their names, the APC people, because of the Muslim ticket.
Yeah.
And when Doyin Okukwe died, do you know who chose Obi's next campaign manager? I said Obasanjo. He chose, what's this guy called? I forget now. Who was one of his spokesperson. The guy who was Femi Fani-Kayode alter ego was chosen. Yeah. But at that point, Obi had already consolidated his internal group made of Ozigbo and Oseloka.
Yeah.
Those are his main people. So, and to capital, when Obi people started decamping, why didn't they decamp back to PDP? And all of them were going to APC, including Ozigbo.
Yeah, he's now in APC.
But they would never discuss it.
Yeah.
They would never discuss how Ikemba's wife became a minister under
APC.
under APC. But when you upload this broadcast now, they will tell you that you are working for Tinubu. Because that is the style, that's the strategy. To just maintain this constant lies against. It's actually how they believe they can cancel people. It's cancellations, like, this is as come as they've talked about to be. You would think that this whole conversation that we've had is about Obi. It's a strategy. Yes, it's their own constant strategy of blackballing everybody. So if you can't be blackballed with USAID, you'll be blackballed with working for Tinubu, or that you hate a certain tribe, or that you don't want Nigeria to be better because you are not supporting a governor who failed in Anambra State. The question that they can never, ever answer to tomorrow is when you say, please, take me to a school that will be built. Say, no, how can he be building schools when he was repairing the old ones? Okay, take me to a hospital or be built. He built hospital. They will lie to you that they saw one hospital he built, I told one of them one day, when Obi went to commission a borehole in the north, one small borehole like that. And I said to me, at that point, that's to tell you that Obi had the fraud packaging came to its 360 degrees, started from somewhere, then there. Because if you look at even what they supplied as part of their own argument that Obi did well, there was a time there was public water works There's an Obi pumping out water from a public water works, fake water works project. Go and ask, where is it today? If it happened, then why are you building boreholes in 2023 or 2024? If there was food security during your time, why are you still sitting with Amajiri to eat rice? Are you now celebrating the poverty or mocking them? But societies have developed. You cannot find the king of Saudi Arabia eating with Amajiris. Because what they have done over these years is to eliminate what make people Amajiris. Their own Amajiris of 1971 are now the captains that are flying their jets. They are the doctors that are running their hospitals. They are the scientists that are creating floating cities. They are the architects that are building the best buildings. Those were the Amajiris. But in 2025, we're still sitting on the floor.
Pretending
that we care about Amajiris. And you don't want me to talk about it. It's crazy.
Yeah. So. What are your thoughts on El-Rufai joining SDP? Now he's left APC.
I think whomever pushed El-Rufai to join SDP either didn't like SDP or didn't like El-Rufai. Because it is like you have lions out there in a circus. And then you push, I don't know what they call people that control lions.
Those in the safari or whatever.
No, the ones that in the circus, the one they use in entertaining people.
Okay.
Those guys.
Yeah.
So if you have like 20 of them.
Yes.
And then you have lions in a cage and you push out one. And that one is mauled. Then the rest will be very careful to come out until they tame the lions. It is not SDP that is at the lions. It's Nigerian people who were waiting for these guys to show up. And then they pushed out El-Rufai. And I'm afraid that others may not join SDP based on how El-Rufai was mauled by public opinion. So what they want to do with El-Rufai coming to SDP is to bring all the Buhari people to come to SDP, pretend like they want to defeat Ashwaju, knowing that it will only enhance his chances. El-Rufai came to SDP to come and use it as a negotiating platform to go back to the APC. But he didn't know that the APC he left behind, or that he left, it's not the APC they created. It has become a Frankenstein
monster.
Monster that eats its creator. So I don't know if the others will have the courage to come out, but we'll see what happens in the next few. Because what I heard is that Peter Obi was also supposed to join SDP. I don't know if he would do that. Atiku was supposed to join. I doubt he would do that because, El-Rufai is going to be
on his own.
On his own for a while.
Yeah. But what do you think explains this lack of a credible opposition in Nigeria? Like when you look at LP, for example, one would have thought that Labour Party should have become this credible opposition.
If you ask, but if I was with you, I think shortly after the election.
Yes.
Right? But before the election, go and check everywhere. What's my opinion about the Labour Party? I described the Labour Party in a very simple terminology. Short rental. Because that's what the Labour Party has always been. Airbnb. And I didn't predict, I prophesied. Let me use the very popular, that when they are done with Peter Obi, when his rent expires, they'll kick him out. But Peter Obi was trying to play smart on LP. When his rent expired, instead of him to go and renew his rent, he tried to become a landlord. And then that was quashed. And now they're all homeless. Because this Labour Party is a short renter. It's not meant to accommodate you for too long. And when your contract is over, leave. So that's why now he's practically homeless. But I hear he's going to another party they call ADC, which is a smaller party. But how many times will he change a party in his lifetime? Gosh.
Yeah, at some point it just becomes a bit funny and stupid and
we'll
ironic.
see,
Yeah.
We make a lot of predictions and prophecies. Not all of them come to pass.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So let's talk about. I know we're short on time, but let's talk about the Civil War.
Yes.
Do you think Ojukwu was right to start the war?
I cannot speculate on something I wasn't part of. I don't know. But I know that it was not right to have done what they did to the Igbos, what led to the war. A lot of people forget that before the war there was something called pogrom.
Yes, in the notes.
Which is war on a low level, where people were decapitated and sent in their heads sent in calabash down south, just to show to people who were superior. And that a coup that was wrongly labeled an Igbo coup had led to a lot of propaganda and information warfare that riled a lot of people to participate in the war. I read a book written by Max Sillon. I don't know if you read a book. It's about coups and the oil, and I don't know the exact title of the book, but I read it when I was in detention. A lot of atrocities were committed. Even in the barracks, part of what happened was there was a loss of command. You see a junior officer who happened to be from the north, he won't listen to their senior officers. They kill people, in Mami markets, they kill people in the officers' mess. It didn't matter who you are. If you are marked for death, some junior guy just killed you. Yeah. So, war is never justified.
Of course,
yeah. But this was a terrible one.
Yeah. The current issue is about, one of the current topics of the day is about Wike and Fubara. What do you think? How do you think it ends?
I hope they destroy themselves. Yeah. It's just a struggle between two thieves.
Yeah.
Yeah. One who used to aid and abet a former thief.
Yeah.
So I don't get involved in struggles like that.
So no emotions towards Fubara?
No, I don't. At the end of the day,
it seems to me that two elephants are fighting and the ground is... So Rivers people are the ones...
It's who are Rivers people? Rivers people are not the people who are taking sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about Natasha and Ababi? What do you think was going on? What do you think was
I've always said people like Akpabio should never have made it to any public position. They should be in prison. So, and this is what they have done and gotten away with before now. Maybe for the first time, they meant they are matching a woman. So, but there's a side of me too that says, look, that's why you don't engage with these people, befriend them. If you look at the history of Akpabio and Natasha's husband, they were buddies. And there's been public information that they were contractual friends. They helped themselves at one time or the other to move money around. So, but I can't blame Natasha for it, except if there's evidence that she was part of that. So my position sometimes is, and this can be controversial, is don't enable evil, because one day it would get to you.
Yeah.
Even people who don't get,
get swallowed by it.
So there's ample evidence that it's just have been friends for too long. Yeah.
Another activist like yourself is VDM. What do you think of his activism?
Did you just say he's activist like myself?
Well, I think one of
the reason why I said that is that I don't make these comparisons.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, I don't. Look, I used to tell my younger ones, because they come back to me frequently and say, people say I'm sure they want me to be sooner. I said, don't go and do it too, because if you get into trouble, you won't be able to explain it away because your last name is my name. just do what you believe.
Yeah.
It's your conviction. So people always like to make comparison. Just like if somebody comes around now and say, "Oh, Sowore is the new Gani family," I reject it. I can't be Gani. I can't. We didn't wear the same kind of. We didn't live at the same time, even though I was around during his own time. He was a lawyer, bloody geographer who accidentally found myself.
What do you think of what he's doing, VDM? What do you think?
I don't see. That's what I'm saying. It's like, that's what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And maybe the end will justify the means.
Is he a force for good, in your opinion?
I don't.
I think he is. I think he's a force for good.
I don't make those.
So
I'm not a calibrator for people who are activists, because there are people who have criticized my method and found that they were wrong. Yeah. And there are people who have criticized their methods before. I haven't found myself to be wrong. So it's like, I meet all kinds of people in the process of doing this. It's just like we were talking about journalism before. Yeah. I was a different journalist. But a lot of people like, where did Sowore come from? He's a quack, he's this and all that. But today, Sahara Reporters is 19 years old.
Yeah.
Even I did not believe that Sahara Reporters will last that long. Especially when I was sued in the US and my lawsuit lasted for 4 years and it was going to wipe me out because one guy sued me and we couldn't get the case dismissed.
Yeah.
I have since then had 6 different lawsuits in the US. And if you know about lawsuits in the US, UK, you know what I'm talking about.
100%. Yeah.
And I have 13 lawsuits at the federal FCT High Court alone.
Yeah.
And I have criminal charges based on just what I've done. So that's why sometimes I say, walk in my shoes, but we all don't use the same shoe size.
It seems like you want to reserve opinion on him for now.
I want to reserve opinion about so many things. Yeah. Like I mentioned my children. I don't, sometimes I tell my children, just be yourself. You were asking, maybe if I was around, they would be activists. I would not have asked my children to be like me because they live in a different world.
Yeah.
I also don't want them to be like, oh my God, if my father didn't do this, if I didn't do what my father tried to do, I wouldn't be so messed up. I don't know. So when people make these comparisons, honestly, I just keep my opinion. Yeah. And I'm opinionated.
Of course, yeah.
But there are certain opinions or circumstances that are allowed to be judged by history.
Yeah.
I said it somewhere else that there was a time in Philippines, this Philippines that you heard about, they decided that they don't like serious politicians. They started making comedians.
Yeah.
Their president, you remember Estrada was that man called who ended up in jail. That is their right.
Yeah.
Yes. So there are a lot of things that we don't even see, circumstances around us. Maybe the world has changed without writing us a memo. That the next set of activists are not likely to be people who are wearing khakis.
True. Last question.
Yes.
Broader picture. Let's look at foreign policy. How would you like to see the Ukraine war and Gaza? How would you like to see it come to an end?
Gaza is more, for me, very sad because it is...
Me too as well.
Is the boiling point of global hypocrisy.
Yeah.
That we can say it's all right to kill Palestinians, but it's not all right to kill monkeys in Africa. That to care more about gorillas in the Congo than to care about the people of Congo. That's the way I see the Palestinian Gaza debacle. Yeah. It's for Ukraine and and Russia. It's very strange that I kind of don't lose sleep over it because even with the whole war happening in Ukraine, they are doing better than Nigeria.
The lights are still on.
They're sending all grains.
Yeah.
They have minerals that are being pumped out. They keep fixing the electricity. You just read someday, you watch and they say they just tried. The bomb never really touched the electrical grid. I'm like, what kind of bombs are these? But Nigeria, there's nobody fighting us. We have no electricity. We have nothing. So I kind of feel like Ukraine and Russian wars, a different level. Their war is kind of sexy.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like what a cool kind of war. And somebody's going to watch this and say, this guy is an idiot. But that's how I feel, considering contextually, yes, is what I feel like. Because I come from a country this is not wartime, but we're in a warlike situation.
Yeah.
No electricity, national grid falling apart. I don't know who's bombing it. There's no food, unemployment. We are not. Ukraine can provide shelter for everybody that don't want to leave. Nigeria can't provide shelter for everybody who doesn't want to leave.
Yeah.
So that's. But I just hope they resolve it.
Yeah.
On time. But sometimes it's just like you're taking Panadol for other people's headaches.
No, Your Excellency, it's an honor. Honestly, whenever
stop calling me Excellency.
That's
the appellation of bad guys.
No,
in Nigeria.
Someone asked me a question. Why are you calling him that? Why not? Is he an elected official? I was like, no, it doesn't matter. Those who are called, I don't even deserve it, but you deserve it. That's my point.
It's just like I hate being called Excellency.
No, you deserve it. But the point is, I just wanna
Your Majesty.
I just wanna thank you from the bottom of my heart. I do really appreciate our friendship.
And let me say this too, that most people didn't know that you were expelled from the university, and that was how I heard about you for the first time.
And you were helpful. You were helpful to me back then. Yeah.
Do you know? I was checking yesterday that one day I was about to travel. Yeah. This is the last part before you wrap up.
Yeah.
In the US, and they said somebody was being expelled from Redeemer University.
Okay.
And I wrote on Twitter that this person was expelled from the university because he criticized the vice chancellor. And I was so livid because it reminded me of my own part. Do you know who that person was? Macaroni.
Yeah, Macaroni, yes.
So, and he was recalled back based on that campaign we did. So I'm always happy. Yeah. And this is to wrap up the whole thing about how it is important that even when you don't know people, you can respect their rights.
No, honestly, you're an incredible person. I'm so grateful. Thank you for everything you've done for me, for the podcast as well. Like I said at the beginning, some of the guests who have come on the podcast came through you. And I'm so grateful for your friendship. It's an honor knowing you. You're a great guy. I could go on and on talking about how nice and how great you are behind the scenes. And thank you so much for doing this. It's been very enlightening to me, and I'm sure to the listener as well. They've enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Sam. I'm so grateful.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.